to A Therapist, Buddhist, and You. My name is Luke DuBois, and I'm here with Zal Mal.
Hello, guys.
We're here recording on another lovely Saturday morning.
Yeah.
In downtown Annapolis. Once again, we're brought to you by the Recovery Collective. We have another guest today. Before we get into that, like usual, please like and review, but most importantly, share, as collectively we can find solutions to all things health and wellness. We welcome you to our podcast today. We will explore an inspiring story of resilience, recovery, and hope. Today we have the honor of speaking with Lisa Hillman, a remarkable author and advocate in the field of addiction and family recovery. Lisa's personal journey through the challenges of addiction within her own family has led her to write the powerful book, Secret No More, a candid account of her experience and the source of hope children with addiction. Her story and insights have touched the lives of many, and we are privileged to have her join us today to share her remarkable journey and the wisdom she has gained throughout the way. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a little bit concerned about the terms honor and privilege of being here. I don't know if it's an honor and privilege to have this in our families, but I'm glad to be here, Luke. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Honest and privilege for us. So, well, you wrote in, I believe, 2019, the book Secret No More. Give us a little bit about the background. Like you said, it's not an honor and privilege based on the conditions and experiences, but tell us a little bit more about that.
So we have, what about 4 hours to discuss this?
Lifetime of experiences, huh?
So, this goes back to actually the year, I guess, 2007, 8. When a phone call late on an August night from a loved teacher at Annapolis High School first alerted me that something might be off with my son. This teacher called to say that friends of my son's had come to him to tell him that Jacob was either drinking or using. He just wasn't sure what, but something was off. My reaction, of course, was, you have the wrong child. Not my son, not in my family. There was and is, as far as I know, no addiction in our family. I always thought it was genetic and passed along in the genes, and my husband and I could barely finish a glass of wine. So, of course, Jacob denied it. He became belligerent. He wanted to know who the kids were who, quote unquote, turned him in. And that's actually how it began. A long story from there. I will be guided by you as to which parts of the story would be most helpful this morning.
So you have a disgruntled... How old was he at this time?
He was a senior in high school. 17.
That is angry that someone snitched on him.
Exactly.
And what do you do as parents at that point?
So, as you know, the best defense is a good offense. Okay. And he was going on the offensive. We said, let's keep an eye on this. He was an A student. He was very active in a running club at school. He was in the band. Your typical good, smart student. In that fall, he was accepted to the University of Maryland in a college honors program. So my thought was, maybe this is just a rite of passage. Don't all kids drink? Don't all kids smoke? Lighten up, Lisa. Let him have his fun. This is his last year before he has to knuckle down for college. Plus, the shame started to settle in. I'm thinking, if this really is a problem, I can't deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to face it. I'm not prepared for this. If I'm not prepared, therefore I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. So denial was very, very strong in those months. Fast forward, obviously, the track of addiction, he gets worse. And we're called into school before the end of school in June to warn us that he might not graduate.
Ooh, that's a turn.
Then it got serious. I'm still trying to deny it, and I'm certainly still hiding it. No one knows, not even my brother, the only other family member, keeping it very close to myself. Jacob goes off to beach week. Then the second phone call comes in. Lisa, your son's been arrested on the beach in North Carolina. We race down to North Carolina. He faces court. We come home. That summer, my only thought was, get him to the University of Maryland, because surely the smart people at a university who deal with kids like this all the time, they'll know how to, quote unquote, fix him.
That's your hope at the time.
That was the hope. I was pinning it on that.
You go from, you can't deny there's legal issues now, but where can you go? Hope. School is, he can put his efforts and focus and healthiness and that's the hope.
That's the hope. Just pack him up, send him off to college and say goodbye, and he'll be fine. It was just a phase, a senior high school phase.
So can you relate to any of that story?
Yes, I do. Yeah. How was that period like, although it was short, within yourself? Like in the beginning, it was like, oh yeah, that's not my son. And then having the difficulty to accept it, but then the disease of addiction is progressive, like within that. So your reaction to that within yourself, how was that internal journey like?
I think the court situation rocked me. I think that was like a cold washcloth against my face. Ooh, this is real. I still was trying to hide it. I no longer could deny it, but the shame set in, the shame of addiction, not in my family. At the time call, I was, and Luke is aware, had a fairly significant position at Anne Arundel Medical Center, and I was afraid it would hurt my job. I was afraid people would not trust me. If her son has an addiction, what kind of mother is that?
That hits you right in the heart, doesn't it? And with the legal system, it lingers. It's not, hey, you're charged and a month later. It just sticks around until you get that.
I think in our case, Jacob got very, very lucky. He, I didn't know what PBJ meant.
Okay.
I thought it was peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
But, probation before verdict, whatever.
Yeah.
And he got very lucky. He had to do some community service that summer.
Yeah.
And again, typical mother, I arranged for the community service. We helped him find it. He spent that summer before college doing the community service, but I knew he wasn't right. I knew it. And yet I wasn't sure where to turn to get help. He did get evaluated at Pathways. And he was seeing a psychologist at the time. With great deference to your profession, not everybody is as good as you are. Now, again, this was 12 years ago. We've learned a lot, I think, in 12 years, wouldn't you say?
Sure.
But at that time, the psychologist said to me, I just told your son to smoke a little less. And that just didn't sound right.
Yeah, it's during the evaluation intake. Yes, there's external motivation. There's, a probation before judgment. But I myself can relate to when I was client, before I was getting admitted, I lied my butt off for the evaluation. This is just a slap on the wrist. And I had things prior to my admissions into Pathways as a client. But yeah, I had a lawyer tell me, just literally tell me before the court, just don't smoke. That's all he was worried about. Yeah, take these classes that I didn't actually have to take. I just had to pay, and I didn't even take classes. So that's where my manipulation, my disease was. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it, I want to hear, you've written a book, so we can talk more about that. I know you have developed a lot of tools to deal with that because my parents went through something similar, so the difficulty comes from that they had no prior education or any kind of information what addiction looks like, So like for you to embark on that journey, sounds like it's quite a process, but like what prompted you, or how was that beginning process like for you not only to be supportive, but for your own spiritual well-being in a way as well?
Well, it took some time, as addiction took some time to take hold of my son. It took me some time to figure out what to do for myself. It took me some time even to figure out that I had to do something for myself. You fast forward, Jacob is at the University of Maryland and flunks his first year and comes home. And even then, I'm still not doing anything for myself. I'm just still ashamed, still in not denial, still ashamed, still trying to figure out what to do, kind of leaping from episode to episode, hoping this is just going to stop, not facing it. He was at the time seeing a counselor. I was not. And it wasn't until he got to Pathways and was then sent to Florida for continued recovery that a counselor said to me, Lisa, your son is going to have his program. What are you going to do for yourself? I'll never forget that because my first thought was, I'm not the sick one. My son has the addiction. I'm a healthy person. And yet I realized I was crying all the time. I was isolating. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was fearful. Now I've learned many of the same emotions that someone with addiction has. So he suggested, the counselor, that I try Al-Anon. And up until that time, I thought Al-Anon was someplace,
Hmm.
it's just so sad to say it. I thought Al-Anon was a place where women whose husbands were alcoholics went to sit and cry together. That was my image of Al-Anon.
Stigma.
And ignorance.
Yeah.
You know,
Lack of awareness.
and you don't really know what you need to know until you need to know it.
Sure.
But I tried it. I tried Al-Anon. And that very first meeting, I knew I'd found a home.
I got chills just thinking about that. In a time of need, desperation, the way I don't know how you would explain it. Did you feel that your son became your addiction, obsession at that time? How would you say it?
Well, I mean, I was obsessed with him when he left, even when he left for Florida. I couldn't stop thinking about where is he now? What is he doing? Is he safe? Does he have clean sheets to sleep on? It's such a motherly thing. Is he eating? Is he, but I had to let that go because geographically we were separated and we weren't talking every day. It turns out that's what we both needed. I mean, he definitely needed that. He needed to grow up. There was a counselor at Pathways that said, you got to man up to him. And at the time I resented that statement. Looking back on it, he was absolutely right. So yes, it took me a while to realize that families are affected by addiction as much, if more, I don't know, but certainly they're affected by addiction as much as the person they love.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your mentioning of shame for a few times. And I find it to be a very courageous thing to call out on that, which also is a key factor, not only family member of an addict, but also an addict himself or herself, that's a source of the isolation, to shame is related to hiding, or secrecy. So but then the key, which I think you have mentioned in your book too, the importance of a support network. So it sounds like that was the turning point for you when you found home in Al-Anon, connecting with other people who are going through something similar.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the turning point, going to that very first meeting. I think you never forget your first meeting. It was in a church here in town, only about 7 people there, really small. So I was very exposed. In fact, before I walked into the meeting, I had this last minute thought, I'm going to turn around and go right back home. My husband was home on a Sunday night watching a football game. And I thought, gosh, in 5 minutes, I can be on the couch next to him. I don't have to face this. But you're right. I guess at the time it was courage. It was desperation. I had nothing to lose at that point, right? I knew it was confidential. I knew Al-Anon was private. And I knew that I thought I knew that whatever I said there was safe there. So I walked in and a very large lady with great big fleshy arms grabbed me and said, come here, Mama, I think you need a hug. And I knew that's where I belonged. Now, fast forward, talk about exposure and shame. The second meeting there, I'm sitting in this, again, small room, 6, 7 people. Who walks into that front door but a board member of mine at the hospital?
Oh, wow.
Talk about the phrase, you want a hole to open up in front of you that will where you can sink into. I couldn't hide. Yeah. The metaphor of hiding, I could not hide. She sat next to me and didn't say a word. And then she said, welcome. And I said, I'm here for my son. And I knew that she was there for her father. And all of a sudden, everything made sense.
Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zalmal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zalmal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zalmal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing. You found a home.
Found a home.
What would you say to loved ones, family members who are kind of at that cusp of, do I try Al-Anon? That fear that you're talking, that shame. I mean, you're giving your experience. What would you tell them based on this part of your recovery?
Yeah, they say, and I think it's true in addiction too. You'll tell me, but you come to it when you're ready. And we've got a phrase in Al-Anon: we don't proselytize, we don't promote so much. You come to it when you're ready, but we inform. And what I will say and have said to lots and lots and lots of families is, try it. It's confidential, it's private. You're protected there. It's safe. It's as we say at the beginning of a meeting, it's the right place, the safe place to be. If you don't like it, that's fine. Got nothing to lose except an hour of trying it. And there are all kinds of different meetings, and they're all over the place. They're all over the world. We've been to Al-Anon meetings everywhere. And just try it. If you don't like the first one, try a different one.
That's great. So now you're finding a home. Your son is still using. Where do we go from here?
Well, we go for an example of how Al-Anon helps, I think, helps the families, not the one with the addiction, but the families. 6 months after going to Al-Anon, after starting, and he knew, we told him we were going. He seemed pleased. He was then starting his recovery. He was about 6 months clean, as they say. It was the summer of 2011. He calls me from Florida and says, "Mom, I just wanted you to know that I picked up again. I used again." Pre-Al-Anon, my reaction would have been, I probably would have gone through the phone line and screamed and hollered and yelled and cried. And what do you mean? You have got 6 months. You've just thrown it away. How can you, blah, blah, blah. Post-Al-Anon, at least post 6 months of Al-Anon, I was able to say, take a deep breath, think before you speak. Jacob, thank you for telling me. I appreciate that you shared that. Please take care of yourself. You're the only one who can.
Wow.
I don't know where that came from.
Courage.
And he came back and said, "Thank you, Mom. That's what I needed to hear." End of the phone conversation. Now, I'd like to say that was the end of it.
Yeah.
But of course, he used again and again and again and got very sick by the end of that year and was back in inpatient treatment in Florida.
That example is that your health, your recovery hit his heart. That those words of love and courage and recovery affected your son and began to chip away at the addiction, right?
I hope so.
You didn't contribute to the addiction, that's for sure.
No, right. I didn't make it worse.
Yeah.
I don't know if I made it better, but I was honest with him and I was protecting myself at the same time.
And to me, I'm trying to put myself in your son's shoes at that point. If I were to get off the phone, I'm sure I would be, my addictive mind probably couldn't process that. But I know my addictive mind wouldn't be full of fear and anger at that moment. And that's telling.
Yeah, and it's quite a powerful thing for him to honestly share with you about the fact that he picked up. That to me sounds quite powerful compared to the very beginning where he was not accepting, like kind of denying that in a way. So, because, that's the most important thing in a relationship, my kids are very young, but like, I want to create an environment where they are very willing to be honest, like make mistakes and then honest and then get better, as opposed to I need to be perfect and then don't let them know.
And they know that they're safe with you as well. Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
That's such one of the pivotal moments in this recovery journey for both of you. Can you discuss more in that moment? You get off the phone. Where's your hope at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I hung up, and my husband, we took the message in the car. I remember that it was had been hiking, and we were back in the car and took the message. We didn't say, we were silent for a while. I just had to process that. I was concerned, but he also said to me, I picked up, but I'm back on track again. That was part of his call. So I thought, okay, he's realized that the term I guess is relapsed. He's the disease has picked up, or the condition has gotten him again, but he's back on track. I was hopeful. I mean, I never gave up hope. Never, ever, ever. And I tell that to parents, if your child is alive or your loved one is alive, there's always hope. I was hopeful. I was very hopeful that he would get and stay back on track. Is this it? I didn't know. I'd also learned not to look too far down the road. Yeah. The expression one day at a time is so true in life, whether or not addiction is in your life. So I wasn't looking too far down.
So you guys are both working your recovery programs. When did the inspiration of writing this, how did this book come to be?
When I was living through this with Jacob in the in the high school, college years and after, I started keeping a journal. I'm a writer by nature, been since I was a little kid, and I've kept journals off and on in my life. And I found that writing was helpful to me to live through this because a white paper is non-judgmental. It was safe. Again, I keep coming back to the word safe. So I kept a journal, not every day, but many days. In my work at the hospital, I kept running into people, particularly mothers, whom I suspected might have had a child also like me. There's something in the way they talked about their children, something in their eyes. And I thought at some point, I'm going to keep this journal because I'll eventually, years from now, I'll need to go back and read it and understand how it started and how we got to wherever I'm going to be. So it was a combination of that, a combination of thinking maybe one day I'll write something that'll help these mothers. That's how I got started. And I do tell people, even if you're not a writer, journaling, I'm sure you both know about journaling. Journaling is therapeutic.
Yes.
So I encourage people to journal as well.
Yeah. So it can be one way for the subconscious to be a little bit more conscious. Yeah.
Yeah, that is connected with, I think of hope as a spiritual concept. There's so much spiritual embedded in that concept of hope, But also the thing about journaling, maybe this was your experience too, it helps to process things and reflect. And in one of the 12-step literature, when you were talking about your how you responded to your son's phone call, that there is that line of like, we pause and take it easy. The pausing is just so powerful that when something out of our control comes up, our immediate reaction is to react right away. But then when there is that pause, either with the help of a support network or writing in a journal, it helps us to process it and then be calm and then say things that are helpful to ourselves and also to the persons we love, And
I'm sure you know that Al-Anon has the same 12 steps as AA. And so we work the steps as well and apply them to our own situations. And so, yes, we also teach think before you speak, pause before you speak.
We say first thought wrong for us.
Yeah. First thought fear, second thought faith.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So like that, that journaling turned into a book. Is that?
Well, and then so fast forward, Jacob goes to his third inpatient treatment center at the end of 2012, end of 2011. And at that time, the counselor said to me, your son needs inpatient treatment badly. This was in Florida. And I said, how many times do I have to pay for this? Because addiction treatment can get expensive. It sounds harsh. I'm a mother. To say how many times do I have to pay for this sounds...
It's a reality.
It's what we have to live with.
Yeah.
And the counselor said, tell your son this is the last time, which we did. At the time, I meant it. I'm glad that never got tested. But Jacob knew it was the last time we were going to pay for treatment. And he also knew that if he needed treatment again, there's a place in Florida that's not quite as nice as where he was. And he didn't want that. So for whatever reason, whether it was because we were stronger, whether it was because Jacob was ready, he says he was ready. It was New Year's Eve. It was, the third or fourth or fifth time. It was a holiday that he was inside a treatment center. He found someone to be a sponsor. At the end of that 100 days in that treatment center, that began his long-term recovery. And I decided around that time, and not because he was in recovery, I decided that I wanted to write this book that I had a story to tell. I wasn't sure how the story was going to end, but I had a story to tell. So I retired early from the hospital in 2013 with an idea that I would write this book.
So it was not a mission. What was it for you?
Well, it was
calling.
I think that's a better word. I had to get this out. I had to take this journal and my experiences and my denial and shame and now some strength, and write it. I had to write it. That book just poured out of me. It took maybe a year to write, but it wasn't hard. I mean, it just poured out of me. A lot of re-editing and refining, but just poured right out.
Through that process, what did you realize what the book was going to turn into from beginning to where it published? Did it change? Did it evolve as you started writing?
Well, it was my story. It was personal. I knew that I was revealing something that a lot of people didn't know about. I knew this was the ultimate, maybe, test of my well-being. I needed permission from my son, of course, and he was the first one to read it. He and my husband. But as I wrote it, I realized, again, because I was still involved at the hospital and still meeting a lot of people and still hearing about addiction, there were a lot of people just like me in certain socioeconomic class, certain, here in town and elsewhere, who were in hiding. I heard more stories about mothers who kept their sons in their basement or in the attic, and they would say to me, "How can I kick my son out? He could die on the street." And I would come back and say, "He could die in your house." Yeah. As harsh as that was to say. So I knew that this book might be helpful to a few people. And it evolved into a story that was more universal than I ever thought it would be.
It brings hope, to other people, other parents.
Well, that was my aim, to bring hope.
Yeah, and that secret no more. I think there's a book called High Society. I think Dr. Joseph Califano, one of the statistics he gave from, I believe, the NIH, that 1 out of 4 Americans will have an alcohol or drug disorder in their lifetime. Doesn't mean that they'll be substance use disorder severe, but will have a disorder with drugs or alcohol. 1 out of 4.
Wow, that's very high.
That's very high.
And look at the people that will affect, right? The family members.
Everybody will be affected.
Yeah. The other thing I've learned since is that if one family member gets well, it can affect the health of other. It doesn't mean your loved one's going to go into recovery, but it can affect the rest of the family. And that's something else that's important. And that was something, a part of the story is that, if you have a loved one, particularly if you're a parent, or even if it's a spouse who's the addiction one, you can forget the healthy ones in the family and neglect them, as I did. You can forget them. And that's important to remember, that you need to be there for your healthy children or your healthy parents or your healthy whatever. You can't just be all consumed by the one with the addiction, because then 2 of you go down, not just 1 of you.
Yeah, if we can, I want to explore more into and hear your insight on that, because not only for our listeners, but also for myself as well, that I don't know if it's a very tricky or advanced thing, because the famous Serenity Prayer talks about wisdom to know the difference, So as you were sharing earlier too, to know the difference between, am I, especially when we're dealing with a loved one, especially blood related, I want to care for them. Like, do you have a bed to sleep tonight? Do you have, and then I just want to give, but then how do I know the difference, whether I need to stop and then love from a distance, and then as opposed to I need to get involved, there's a very intuitive, spiritual line between the two. And I know there's no one size fits all for a universal formula for any kind of situation, but based on the way things are, how you're connecting with the other person, how's that experience like for you throughout this process?
Well, for me, and I will be, I'm not just saying this because we've got Luke sitting here and you sitting here, but I think getting the right kind of professional help is important, because you don't know what to do. I mean, if you're new to it, you're just so thrown awash. You just don't know what to do. So getting the right kind of help is important, not just for your loved one, but for yourself, and getting some guidance. And I did have some help along the way. People who told me, don't enable, you learn what enabling is. Boundaries, set boundaries. that was new to me too. You mean boundaries? I can have a boundary between me and my son. The term codependent never came up with us, but I think we were a little bit then. The other expression that really rocked me, and I learned it at my second or third Al-Anon meeting, is
3 C's?
no, well, that 3 C's were important, but with love, separate with love,
Detach with
detach,
love.
detachment with love, detachment, but with love. When I heard the word detachment, I could have fallen on the floor. Detach. You mean I literally can separate, detach myself from my son. And the image that came to me was the umbilical cord.
Yes.
I got to cut it again.
Yeah.
Second time I got to cut it. He's his own person. I've got to let him grow up and be his own man. I can't be there all the time. I can't control what he's going to be. He's got to figure that out. And that, as a mother and a parent, was the hardest lesson to learn.
Yeah.
I think that's difficult for family members, especially for mothers. There's a genetic cellular attachment, but that emotional attachment is so tough, which is part of the recovery process. Yeah, it's one of the ways that I try to help people do that is enabling. What is enabling? And I often ask people process what this is for them can be different. Are you supporting their recovery or their addiction? Parents, the loved one, the spouse, your actions or your words, do you feel that you're supporting their recovery or supporting the addiction? And then identifying that for them is a big process.
Yeah, in our Buddhist tradition, there's this concept which is translated as equanimity, which comes from a word called upekkha, which is one of the practices of loving kindness. And that equanimity, which is described as like the evenness of the mind, that it also stems from that concept of karma that, like you were talking about, that the loved one, I can help, but then that person has his own journey from previous actions and also all the wise actions that person will take. And I can aid that, but then I cannot make, that person take the right action, So like that evenness of the mind is so important to real. And then I want to connect that too with the hope and the trust. Hope and trust are very related to that. The situation is difficult, but then you trust the process. You had hope that things will get better. And that was kind of like your guiding force behind your interaction with your son. Is that
Well,
right?
we had, my son and I and his father and sister, all of us, we were close. We were a close family to begin with. And the first, 16 years of his life, 15 years of his life, we were very close. So I was banking on that to come back, to see us through. I kept thinking, he's going to come back. He's going to work through this. My husband was less positive about this experience. He didn't see a happy ending necessarily, but I could only see a good ending. I could never imagine a bad ending to this. So I kept thinking that if he continues to work his program, and he did, and I continued to work mine, and I did, maybe we'd come back together and, gratefully thank something we have.
Yeah.
When the family was in the thick of the addiction, how support groups were a key piece for your health. Were there any other coping strategies that you were relying on through that process? How else did you take care of yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Were there any other coping strategies? Well, of course, once I started Al-Anon and retired, then I had more time, long walks. We have dogs. Loving the dogs helped. I guess by the time I had Al-Anon, there were people I could talk to, even outside of Al-Anon meetings. Al-Anon gave me friends.
Yeah.
To this day, very close friends.
It opened up a whole other avenue.
Totally.
Yeah.
And friends and that's why, anyone listening, I would just encourage, if you're sad and you're struggling, just try it. It gave me friends who got me.
Yeah.
I no facade, no veneer, no shame.
Yeah.
Instantly we were simpatico. And
Authentically you.
correct.
The vulnerability.
Exactly.
All of that.
Exactly. And that was extremely helpful.
Because I think of the example of you had that hope and your husband didn't. The addiction just permeates in every aspect of the family's lives. And then there can be friction with the parents and their relationship, and then how it just affects the family disease, the whole family dynamic.
You think that even your family members will understand, but they don't necessarily.
Yeah.
And, more and more I've heard other people say, I can't talk to my sister about it because she says to me, well, why don't you just send him here or send him there?
Sure.
You just don't get it.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. So the other thing too, Luke and I have talked about this, the concept of recovery, that although it is recover, which sometimes mean to go back to the way it was, but like there's also this thing where it's not a factory reset, it's something entirely new. And that the book does have a happy ending. And, so like in terms of that, how has that been not only the renewed relationship between you and your son, but like the new dimension that was discovered? Has that been the case too?
That's a great thought. Very, very intuitive and perceptive of you as well. No, I don't like the term recovery actually, because you don't go back. I think you go forward. I think I have said this. I've been blessed to go to many, many, many dozens of AA meetings with my son. And again, anybody listening, if you have a chance to go to an AA meeting, you can't go unless you belong there, but you can go with a friend. I would recommend it because it gives you such hope. But I think people in recovery, we've got to use the word, I guess, are some of the most profound individuals I have ever met. They've been through hell and back, and that gives them something in their lives, and maybe it's spiritual, I'm sure it is, that the rest of us don't have. So yes, I think that, am I glad we had this in our lives? Not necessarily, but my son says, Mom, I hope one day you'll realize that it's good that we've had this. He says that. And he is a much different man today than I know he would have been had he not had the addiction and the experiences he's had. He's a profound, wise, kind person. It's given him so much insight into the world. He's got friends around him. I do too, that we both never would have had.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming up on the end based on our time frame that we have, and we really appreciate you joining and sharing your experience. And is there any message that you want to provide to our listener before we close things up?
So if you're listening and you love somebody with an addiction, and millions of people do, please, please, please get some help for yourself, whether you talk to a professional counselor or try Al-Anon, again, which is free and private. Get some help for yourself. Whether or not your loved one will get well, you can get well. And then there's always hope for your loved one as well.
Yeah, that's a very full of hope note to end on. And I really appreciate you joining us. And this is very heartwarming experience, to have you here, because I can just feel it in your presence, that how difficult it was, but also like how the metaphor that I've heard of is like a butterfly, a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. It's not an easy process, but like by the end of it, everything, and that another saying that is popular in 12-step is more will be revealed.
Yes.
That sparks so much hope in a difficult situation. Yes, more will be revealed in a way that I don't see what future holds, but I know and I trust the process. And it sounds like that was your journey. So it brings so much hope to this conversation, but also to the listeners as well.
Yeah. And when we're in this stage of fear, resentment, trouble, that installation of hope is so important. And that's one of the messages that I got, and one of the part of the title of your book, and part of my takeaways is addiction affects the individual and the entire family. Maintaining hope is crucial. Education and understanding of addiction is essential, and it's a process. Building a support network. Wow. That was a big part of your story. And overcoming stigma and promoting empathy and understanding within yourself and the family dynamic is all a process. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Where can they find your book?
Amazon.
Yep.
And or the library.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it's called The whole name, Secret No More. There's a subtitle to it.
Subtitle.
No, Secret No More. So thank you, everyone, for listening again. If you think others would benefit from the podcast episode, please share with others, as collectively we can find a solution to all things health and wellness. My name is Luke.
And this is Zaw. Thank you all for listening.
See you next time.
See ya.